Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about Gorbad Ironclaw in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, and how Creative Assembly could have handled this campaign in perhaps a better way than what they ultimately ended up doing. Admittedly, I had hoped that they would improve this campaign with the release of patch 6.1, same with Skulltaker. They did not. Maybe looking forward in the future, because it is very likely we're never going to get another Greenskin or Corman rework unless Creative Assembly decides to release a lot more content. So I do hope that this is not the last version that we have for either Skulltaker or Gorbad Ironclaw, because they could genuinely use some improvements. But let's talk about what Creative Assembly did, the good and the bad. Well, what's genuinely good about Gorbad is he's actually a really solid Legendary Lord himself. His faction does have issues, but he as a Legendary Lord is fantastic. He has an upkeep benefit, he has Orcs' best ability in his army leadership aura size, he has character experience for all characters faction-wide, research rate, and the boss has a plan ability. Then you get melee attack, melee defense, weapon strength, faction-wide. It's not just for himself, but faction-wide. Those are some great effects, but he also gets a bunch of benefits for his own army and for himself. He can get Glorious Charge, which is a really good benefit. He is a Cavalry Lord. He is the only Greenskin Legendary Lord that is, well, Grom works as well, but Grom's Chariot has some issues. But in terms of actual cavalry, not the Chariot, he's the only Greenskin that has that. Azak has Flying Mount, you have a Ground Mount. It's a pretty powerful one. And you can get things like bonus versus large or bonus versus infantry. So there's a bunch of different benefits over here in this skill line. Lord effects, Lord design, pretty good. His item is not necessarily all that special. I wish the Mangler was better. Maybe he could have used the Rune Fang. He does have it attached to his shield on his back over there. But yeah, it could have been better, but you know, not really something to complain about. So that's great. Another thing that I think Creative Assembly did well is with regards to his starting position. He starts in Death Pass with 2 settlements, and he has the ability of dominating this area. While these are only tier 1 settlements, and that is a shame because I do personally prefer starting with a higher tier settlement, unlocking more unit variety, hero variety, and so on and so forth, it does end up working, especially because when you're playing Gorbad, Carragate Peak starts with a smaller garrison, so you can declare war on them and confederate them fairly quickly. So you could technically argue that Gorbad actually doesn't start with a tier 1 settlement, he starts with a tier 3 settlement. And that would be a reasonable argument to be made with regards to Gorbad's campaign design. This starting position as well ends up working quite well, especially when you compare it to when you add the victory conditions. So your short campaign victory conditions require you to effectively take control of the Badlands, either yourself or through military allies. Your long campaign victory conditions require you to go to the Empire. And what's good about this is you also have temperate climate as being viable. So what this means, between Wasteland, Mountain, Temperate, and Savannah, you end up with a very substantial section of the campaign map that is solid climate. Like everywhere from Bretonia and deep into Cathay is viable. And there's only a handful of settlements that have uninhabitable climate as opposed to just unpleasant. Jungle in particular being unpleasant. So you end up having a great deal of climate viability, great deal of campaign viability. You also have diplomatic choices. Do you ally the Skaban? Do you ally Skarbrand? Do you go to war with Skarbrand? You do have those kind of choices to be made in this campaign. So I think his starting position, the dynamics of that starting position, and himself as a Legendary Lord, those are very solid. Could have used a better item, but can't really complain on that. So a really solid A tier when we're talking about that. But here's the problem. Faction effects and unique campaign mechanics. And I think this is where we got to talk about how Gorbad is disappointing in terms of how he works. So his faction effects are fairly lackluster. The only thing that's actually useful, and it is certainly a very strong benefit, is the ability of recruiting units in in -1 turn globally. So that means, while you do have a limited pool of global recruitment capacity initially, and you can get more, you do end up being able to recruit a wide variety of units across your empire. And since you have a good amount of territory to cover, it just makes sense. Nothing to complain on that. The income from raising settlements, it's a nothing affair. The reason is, in every Greenskin campaign, raising settlements is not worth doing. Even if you don't care about the settlements themselves, you will gain more money even with this kind of benefit, and even if you increase income from raising settlements by a substantial amount, you will gain more money by sacking settlements or looting and occupying it, causing a rebellion, potentially dealing with that rebellion, or taking the settlements and selling them. Raising settlements is not a moneymaker in any campaign, even for Khorne, who wants to raise settlements for other reasons, but it's not money that's incentivizing Khorne for raising settlements, and Khorne does have better benefits in terms of being able to do that. So it's not worth it. Greenskins can get such a ludicrous amount of post-battle looting for money from looting and occupying settlements, or sacking settlements and occupying them, that raising them, not worthwhile. You don't want to do it, ever, in a campaign. Also, Greenskins have the ability, or the benefit, if you will, of being able to take a settlement at the same tier it is at. It is a chance-based affair. Wish it wasn't necessarily a chance-based affair. Wish we had more control over that. Maybe we get more, less income from looting the settlement if we do so. If we take it at the same tier, just an idea to throw around there. But that's more of a Greenskin issue. Still, raising settlements, pointless. What about the rewards, increasing the rewards from completing a WA? Well, the problem is the WA mechanic itself has such a long timer that you're not going to use it that many times in a campaign. So every 20 turns you can get a reward, from an increased reward. But it's not such a substantial reward that you're really going to care about it. So 2 out of 4 faction effects are worthless. What about the plan? His unique campaign mechanic and what really is standing in for a faction effect? Well, the plan is not a great mechanic whatsoever for a number of reasons. First off, let's consider how the plan works. Usually, the way the plan works is you need to have certain units in an army in order to get certain effects. Like, for instance, you got Gorbad's boys, but this only works if you have Gorbad and 2 orc boys. Not even orc spear boys. It should be orc spear boys. This is, by the way, one of the reasons why this mechanic would need to update. I don't see a reason why we shouldn't have spear boys over here. It's literally the same unit, just with a spear as opposed to, a choppa. But yeah, you need to have those units, and it's not just a question of having the units and then using a tactic. No, you need to maintain the units. There's also a cooldown effect that gets put in on these things when you enable them. So you can only have so many tactics. That is a bit of a problem. So the way you use these, already a problem. A lot of the cool stuff does also require you to do a bunch of different objectives. Now, some of them will come very easily, like complete a call to war, campaign movement range upkeep, vigor loss reduction, right? Other things do require you to go completely out of your way for a benefit that may or may not be questionable, right? So you can get physical resistance for ASCII Skull Crew, Vanguard deployments for Savage Orc, and Surprise Savagery for Savage Orc units. But you have to go out of your way to get these kind of things. This is not even a bad one. There are worse ones in a campaign that, in a lot of ways, like, for instance, win 50 battles with Gorbad Ironclaw, and you get Vanguard deployment for all your units. That's a strong benefit, but winning 50 battles with one particular army in a campaign is pretty annoying. So there are some great benefits, but there's also some really questionable ones, and ones that, even if you had access to them inherently and you could choose them, it would not necessarily be worth it. Balancing-wise, there are just flat-out better benefits than others. You only have 3 tactic slot per each army. And, well, let me just say it like this. Regimental knocks everything out of the water, because campaign movement range upkeep and vigor loss reduction are very damn substantial as benefits. There are some other benefits, like wins a magic cost for big and little wad. That's also really, really good. And yeah, just like cast 10 big or little wad spells, and then, weirdly enough, it didn't factor in, whatever. Yeah, I've been able to avoid actually fighting manual battles in this campaign. That's more to do with some of the bullshit that you can get dealt with. But you can do a bunch of different benefits. Well, I won't be able to avoid fighting Scarbrand. That's for damn certain. But anyway, there are a bunch of different benefits you can get. But yeah, some of these things are just much, much better than other benefits that you can get in your campaign. And because you only have 3 of them, like for 3 slots, you're ultimately going to gravitate towards the same choices every time. And you're going to focus on unlocking those kind of choices in a campaign as opposed to that. So if the system is supposed to push this idea of pushing a player towards using greater variety of units, going for different effects, using different effects, if fly out doesn't work. The power of the Wa, regimental, just fly out better than other things, as well as which one was it? So you can also get drag the battle wagons, which replenishes campaign movement range. You tell me with a straight face that these compare to that some of the other things on this list compared to those kind of benefits. A couple of them will be. Some of them may be worth using, to be sure. But there are some benefits, like, the army can use tunneling. Like, there's like 4, 5, 6 at most tactics that are always worth using above everything else. Everything else is pretty much fluff. And that is a shame. And they would be fluff even if you could choose them inherently. When you are forcing a player to go out of their way to do certain objectives, recruit an army composition, then maintain an army composition, to use these tactics and maintain these tactics, that is a problem. Another issue that comes with this is how you gain these plans, how you use these plans. You have to fight battles with Gorbad. And that already creates a significant limitation on how many you can get in a campaign. So you might say, it pushes you for meaningful choices. It does not. Quite the opposite. It means that you're going to gravitate for the bigger and strongest benefits because you only have so many of them. You're going to be careful about using them because if you use them well, you're going to get significant benefits, but it kills any kind of choice and consequence. It's one thing for, Kislev with Ice Court. Let's consider the Ice Court mechanic for Kislev, right? Or Grom's Cauldron. Those kind of systems. Like with the Ice Core mechanic, yes, there are some traits that you'll almost always pick. But every time? Well, there are some things that you'd pick early on in a campaign. There are some things you'll pick later on in a campaign. Sure, you might go for a Lord with everything. But imagine if with the Ice Core training system, you had to work to unlock certain traits versus others. You'd always gravitate towards the same things. Like, I use different traits. Like, I might always go with Logisticon just because campaign movement range is so powerful for Kisa without campaign movement range hero. But if I were to get enough heroes in a Frost Maidens in a camp, like, if I had 3 Frost Maidens in an army, or 2 Frost Maidens in an army, led by an Ice Witch Lord, I would actually not care about Logisticon whatsoever because there's a 50% campaign movement range. So there's a limit to how far you can take it, right? There's actually reasons when you're playing with Ice Court to go with a different approach. Same with Grom's Cauldron, to go with different approaches. Some things might be better at certain points for certain armies, but not inherently so. And on top of that, these tactics, these plans, they have limited slots. Okay, fair enough. But they also have limited duration, and they have a cooldown. So you can't just, spam these. There's only so many you can get, so many you can use. So you are going to gravitate towards the same choices again and again and again every single time. Again, we can compare this to Kislev, right? Logisticon is really good until it's meaningless as a benefit, because you're not getting that movement range benefit beyond that, right? Like, you can get 5%, you can get 10% campaign movement range for supporters, 5% for research, that's 15. Logisticon gives you 20%. So if you have 2 with Logisticon, you don't need it anymore. And that's not even talking about campaign movement range that a Lord can provide. So it becomes a question, you lose that kind of benefit quickly. Of just going everyone. You don't want everyone to be logistic. You might benefit from Glacial Blaster. That's just the point about Kislev. But see, I'm just making this comparison to make people understand there are better systems that handle this idea of pushing a variety of traits or effects better than what this is doing, than what the plan is doing. And because of the limited duration, you're all, again, like just a problem. Now, one will argue, fair enough, one will argue that, well, if you get Lords to level 30, the duration will be infinite. First off, I'm going to say this very clearly. I'm not sure what campaigns people play, and I'm not sure what kind of argument people want to make on that subject, but I'm going to tell you straight up right here. You might have a couple of Lords in a campaign, in a very long campaign. Like, your Legendary Lord probably will get to level 30 very quickly, right? So Gorbad himself, right? So within 30 turns, 20, 30, whatever, he will be there. But other Lords, especially when you have a wide variety of terrain and wide campaign map and you have to move armies from one point or another to deal with situations, getting Lords to 30 to get that infinite duration is not really going to be that workable. You can increase the duration and can increase tactics slots, but then you also run into the issue like it is tedious to manage this. Even if you had unlimited plans, and at one point you can practically get them, right? Because at one point in like 100 turns of a campaign, you probably will have unlimited plans. But then you have the tedium of managing every army, ensuring the plans stay there, ensuring that they have the effects, ensuring they don't lose the effects. Those things get annoying very freaking quickly in a campaign. It's one of the reasons I don't much care for a Stankias campaign mechanic. There's a difference between a Stankias campaign mechanic and Grom's Cauldron. Grom's Cauldron, pretty solid to interact with. Sure, there's a bit of wind up and, unlocking things, but once you unlock things, it's like very good for a long campaign. Grom has other issues. This is constant tedium throughout the course of campaign. It's actually best when you have limited armies, but if you're building a massive empire, and Greenskins do build massive empires and do have massive amounts of army, the kind of benefit that you get from a system like this just loses its charm very quickly. I've come to the conclusion in playing Gorbad campaigns that instead of wasting my time engaging with the system, yes, even things like herd mentality, it is not worth it to engage in. It's not worth it to go for it. Like, inherently, when you're building an empire, you have limited building slots. So why would you go for certain units that you don't need? That if you go for them, sure, it might get a bit of an effect with certain units, absolutely, but you're going to lose elsewhere. And also because of the way skill lines work and armies work, all that, the idea of diversity that this system is trying to push, it's going to fall flat on its face. And it does fall flat on its face. So what do I think Creative Assembly needs to do in order to make the system more attractive? Well, first off, it shouldn't be dependent on having certain units in an army, I think. If you want to buff an army with a particular tactic, I think it should be permanent. I think it should be something that you use, something that is kind of permanent. Maybe something that has an upkeep cost of some kind of description. Maybe, we have, instead of just like a flat number here, or a very small number, we can have a big number, but then we get to decide, okay, where are we going to focus on tactics and strategies, which armies are we going to give it? But it should be permanent. It should be something like, okay, maybe I make this army focus on, on having more ammunition for range units. Maybe I make them better in range, better with cavalry. Maybe I can mix and match various things. You know what's kind of crazy? Do you know who does this better? The freaking Chaos Dwarves actually do this better. You consider the Chaos Dwarves, right? Chaos Dwarves have a system of upgrades for various unit types that give them different upgrades. Of course, they do have an upkeep situation for that with armaments, so they need to maintain them. But they can give different units all kinds of different powers throughout the course of a campaign. I'm quite serious in saying that if Gorbad's system worked more like the Chaos Dwarves, it would be better. Maybe not a slow pace, because it does take a while to build up. There's some issues with Chaos Dwarves in terms of how a lot of the really fun stuff is very late on in a campaign. But at least no one can complain that system doesn't work or that it doesn't make your army, doesn't push you for better variety of units, doesn't make your units behave differently, and really makes them more fun to use in battles. If that was the mission that Creative Assembly was trying to achieve with the system, they failed. They succeeded in other campaigns. Like, we have systems where you can upgrade units and you end up with better unit variety and different playstyles. Like, there's so many things they could have done. Like, you look at Ikeclaw. Like, Ikeclaw is a flat unit upgrade for certain unit types. Okay, that's one thing. But you can look at individual unit customization with Fraud. You can look at faction customization with Grom. You can look at the Chaos Dwarf system. Those kind of things. Hell, I can even look at the freaking greenskins themselves. Like, I'm not even joking. We can look at a scrap upgrade system for better unit customization and how that works fundamentally better than what Gorbad has on offer. It is such a bizarre thing to have this idea of like, oh, we want to push players for different unit customization. Yeah, there's already a system for the greenskins that already inherently does that, because you only have so many scrap in a campaign, and you're going to have to choose what you're going to do with that scrap, how you're going to use it. It is a much better system to use. Like, you can stack upgrades on top of another, but okay, do I focus on just making one mega powerful army, or do I just buff key units in every army? That is significant. That is a good system. So, of all the things they could have used, they instead decided to go with a system that's probably just as bad as Mother Stank has, where it's constant management limitations, doesn't scale very well in the long term, and yeah, just micromanagement. To be fair, Stankia's system is more micromanaged and more tedious, and that's one of the reasons why I'm sure a lot of people don't even engage with that. Powerful, gets the job done. Actually, I think Ostankia's system is better because at least that is significant power and it's not with drawbacks. Here, you do have drawbacks because you're losing certain units that may not work necessarily better in the army you're building because of the skill lines and all that kind of stuff. So that's all I had to say. Christine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more. Let me know what you guys think on this.